Good morning, radio stations. Please stand by. The live press briefing will start in 2 minutes. Radio stations, we're going live in 60 seconds. Ten seconds. Five, four, three, two, one.
Good morning and welcome to the Government of Dominica's daily press briefing post Hurricane Maria. We are all aware that it is now 1 month and 21 days since Hurricane Maria struck this beautiful island of ours. We want to welcome the various radio stations that are joining us at this point, and also those joining us by social media. With me, my name is Cecil Shillingford. I am a disaster risk management specialist consultant with the Government of Dominica. And with me is Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism, Karen Prevost, who is also very much involved in the relief efforts following Hurricane Maria. And today, we will be talking about transitioning from response to recovery. And actually, the transition has already begun, and we are pretty much running a parallel system of response and recovery. But a time will come when we'll totally move away from response and dealing with the recovery aspect. PS Prevost will talk about the relief aspect of response. I'll point to a number of elements in both response and recovery, and speak more to the early recovery aspect. The elements of response would be search and rescue, healthcare, and that is search and rescue, of course, if people are trapped in a certain area, and this happens immediately after the event. So your emergency services go out if people are caught in an area, if people need help to move from one point to another. And the fire service and the police service, they do that very well. You have the healthcare where people may be injured and they need immediate healthcare. They need immediate attention, and that is done in the early stages of the response. Also, emergency shelters. Emergency shelter, that aspect is done even before the event sometimes. And in the case of the weather-related events, people go to shelters because they are not certain about, or they are not comfortable with the area where they are living, either the location or the structure, and they move to shelters before the fact. And also, they remain in shelters after the fact, some very short-term, some more medium-term, and some very long-term. We always prefer the very short-term, but in the case of these devastating hurricanes, categories 4, 5, we always have some long-term sheltering. There's a relief aspect where immediate relief has to be brought to the people because many of them would have lost everything, and the functions of the country, the things like the banking sector, the business communities, etc., that is not functional, so the state has a responsibility to provide relief. Very often you have short-term relief, you go into medium-term relief. We are always hoping that relief will not extend beyond a particular time frame. However, very often you still, even if you cut down on the relief to the general public, all and sundry, so to speak, they are the vulnerable groups that you still have to take care of, and Ms. Prevost will talk about that shortly. And the final aspect of response is the identification, notification to relatives and friends, and the disposal of the dead. So if people have died as a result of the event, that also has to be dealt with speedily. And then you have the other side of the coin, which is the recovery. And of course, when we talk about recovery, we're talking about rehabilitation, we're talking about reconstruction, and we're talking about development. And as I indicated earlier, in the early days, you're pretty much only doing response, and then as you move along, you start doing your transitioning, where you could be running a parallel system where you're doing response with some recovery, and then you move away totally from your response into full-scale recovery. So, just some pointers. I will at this point call on Ms. Prevost, PS Prevost, to talk to us about the relief aspect of our Hurricane Maria response, and then I will go into the recovery stuff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shilinfad, and good morning to everyone, all of our viewers and listeners around the island and across the world who follow us at this daily prep briefing. I've been here before to speak about what we've been doing as it relates to distribution of relief. Just a brief update. Distribution of food and water is ongoing to communities across the island. To date, we have transported over 520 deliveries of food, water and non-food items to over 115 communities. This is equivalent to over 1,000 tons of food and water distributed through the government system. And I must add that government has also recently partnered with the World Food Program to distribute 376 metric tons of food to 40 communities. The World Food Program was here with us at our last press briefing when we discussed relief, and since then the distribution has been completed to these communities, and over 40 communities have received a combination of 27-day, 14-day and 5-day rations from the World Food Program. Communities were selected based on the level of vulnerability, loss of livelihood and access to markets. Food for government distribution has been sourced from a combination of government procurement, both locally and overseas, donations of food from across the world, organizations, individuals, governments, and various groups. And to date, we have received 60 containers of relief supplies. And as previously indicated at other press briefings, those containers with personal relief items for individuals have been passed on to the Customs and Port Authority. Our focus for this week has been on vulnerable groups, so we have been working on distribution to the homes for the aged, to include the infirmary, grotto, chances, house of hope. We are also working with the Ministry of Social Services to complete a targeted distribution to the elderly through the Yes We Care program. We are also working with the Ministry of Social Services on distribution of supplies to foster care families and shelters. Over the last few weeks, and this week in particular, since we have more schools that are currently opened, we are working with the Ministry of Education to deliver water to schools across the island. Moving forward in the transition process, and as Cecil has said earlier, we are looking today at the transition from response to recovery. We have already moved our operations from the port at the Woodbridge Bay, which has really opened up the port to be able to conduct its regular business for commercial operations, and also for individuals to receive their barrels and other supplies that are coming in from overseas. So we have moved our operations out of the port, which was part of the early response phase, since we were not in a position to have proper warehouses for distribution. However, we have since repaired most of the warehouses available to us, and we are working with the operations through the government system and government buildings. We are also collaborating with other agencies in the distribution process. So we are working with the WFP. This is going to be a medium-term strategy that will include the WFP working alongside government on a food security and livelihood subsector committee. Now, this committee meets weekly to review and assess the food security situation and make recommendations. As we move forward, the 8 agencies, we know that the WFP and a number of other agencies are currently recruiting staff to assist with the medium-term strategy, and that will also include the food security and livelihoods sector. We are currently conducting an assessment along with the WFP of the markets, the local markets. We do know that there are individuals and communities who will still be challenged in terms of access to food, partly because the distribution networks or distribution pipelines are not yet fully opened across the island. So while there is access to food in Roseau, with some of our wholesalers and retailers coming back on stream, we still have not yet seen the distribution of food from these retailers or from these wholesalers to some of the rural communities. So we still have a challenge for some of the rural communities with access to food, and this is part of the assessment that is ongoing in terms of determining how we move forward. Now, I normally like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has assisted Dominica. As I said, we have received over 60 containers. Now, this is just containers that we've received. In addition to the containers we've received, we have also had a number of smaller ships that have come in with other items, food and water, also non-food supplies that we have also utilized within the distribution network. And we would like to thank all of our Caribbean neighbors. I would like to point out in particular St. Lucia, Trinidad, Jamaica, Barbados, Grenada, Bahamas, and a number of other islands who have donated. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our Dominicans in the diaspora and their friends who have also supplied us with key essentials, food, water, and some non-food items. We have been receiving these containers. We just received 2 containers from the UK this week that we've also been utilizing as part of the distribution throughout the island, and also the distribution to the vulnerable groups that we've been targeting this week. So again, I would just like to express the government's appreciation to all of the agencies, the countries, the individuals who have been donating to us over the last few weeks. Now we are moving on to a different stage. In the very early stages, we had very limited access because supermarkets were not opened, and it was a very challenging task. I would say it still continues to be a challenging task, but now we do have more access throughout particularly the urban areas, particularly in Roseau and Portsmouth. And also we do have individuals who are now quickly receiving their items on the port, personal items that have been shipped to them. We do have a number of individuals who have traveled as well to be able to purchase their supplies and have been able to come back to ensure that they can provide for themselves. So just to say that we are continuing to work with our partners, and we do appreciate the assistance that we've received so far. One more point as it relates to transition, what we've noticed is that the relief that we are receiving so far in the last few weeks has been focused on the new stage that we are moving to, which is recovery. So we have received a number of building supplies and material, and that has been passed on to the relevant ministry, the Ministry of Housing, and this distribution will be coordinated through this ministry. We've also received some tools and equipment for cleanup, and that has also been passed on to the National Employment Program, to the Ministry of Tourism, which is responsible for the urban renewal cleanup that you see taking place, and also to various government agencies responsible for cleanup of communities. The Ministry of Public Works also has benefited from receipt of some tools and equipment for cleanup. So the relief stage is moving to a more targeted stage. We are moving away, as we have seen in terms of what we are receiving, from the basic items to more essential items that are needed for recovery. And even for those who are still interested in providing support to us in Dominica, we are still making this appeal for these types of items. There are individuals who have lost everything in their homes and in the process of rebuilding. There are other items that required, household items, items for building tools and material and so on. So again, thanks to everyone who has supported. Thanks to all of our volunteers and our staff who continue to work every day. Every time I'm here, I always take the opportunity to thank all of the volunteers, the drivers, those who are loading, those who are packing, those who are going to the communities. And I want to especially thank this morning the Jamaica Defense Force, who for the last 3 weeks has been, we have 8 members of the Jamaica Defense Force who have been assigned to us in the relief distribution subsector, and they have been assisting us with loading, with packing, with distributing supplies to individual communities, and we really appreciate their assistance. We would not have been able to do this without them in the last few days. So again, thanks to everyone, and we look forward to the new phase as we move along to the recovery process. We are also continuing to support the relevant ministries as we look at how we can restore livelihood. So you know that I will also be here to discuss tourism and the work that we are doing in terms of being able to restore our tourism sector and get the livelihoods in tourism back on track. It's very critical to us that livelihoods are restored so that individuals have access to basic items, to food, to water, to be able to purchase the items that they need. So we are continuing to provide support in that area. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, P.S. Prevost, for the great work you've been doing, you and your team, on the relief aspect. And the general public has to understand at this time that the whole issue of relief is not going to continue forever. Right now, the shops and supermarkets, even small shops in communities, are now opening up, and we would like to stimulate the economy by going and purchasing stuff from these outlets. The aspect of families and friends overseas providing assistance to the people here in Dominica, that will continue for a while, but the public support in terms of relief will at some point come to an end. So would like people to begin to preparing themselves for that eventuality. All right, we'll move to the recovery aspect, and as I indicated that we are currently running parallel And one aspect of recovery that we are running parallel is that of rehabilitation. And that is done in the early days after the event to ensure that our lifelines are still functional. And when I speak of lifelines, I'm talking about the health system, I'm talking about access, people can move around freely, the whole issue of water, potable water, and electricity, and things of that nature. And we have seen government moving as quickly as possible to look at a number of healthcare facilities that have been damaged or destroyed during the passage of Hurricane Maria, and trying to do a sort of a quick fix on some of those to ensure that in the communities people are able to still go to their health centers and receive care, receive their medication. I know in some areas, I can speak for my area where the health center was almost totally destroyed, and the officers, the health officers, had to sort of put together a makeshift health center in a section of the school building so as to continue healthcare in that area. As a matter of fact, a few days after the storm or the hurricane, a baby was born in that makeshift health center. So these are some of the things that are being done. There is also the question of public buildings where the state has to continue functioning. It's not a situation where we are all now on holidays and nothing is happening. Soon after, the government tried to ensure that the state apparatus is back, maybe not fully to normal, but there's a semblance of normalcy. And a lot of these facilities were unroofed by the storm and had to be sort of re-roofed quickly in the short term, and more work will be done on them as time moves on. A lot of them are still covered with tarpaulins or plastic sheeting. Issue of road communications, that's one of the lifelines. People need to move from point A to point B. And immediately after the hurricane, you could hardly move 1 mile without having to walk because everything was down. You had trees down, you had debris strewn all over the place, poles, wires, quite a few things preventing you from going to point A or from point A to point B. I remember the day after walking down from my community, Bellevue Chopin, to come to the Emergency Operations Center in Roseau. A trip that would normally take 1 hour to walk took 3.5 hours because of so many things you encounter as you go through. Trees, pools, landslides, you have to cross rivers and what have you. So access right now, you can pretty much go to anywhere in Dominica. You will still find some debris, you will still find some areas precarious, tight spots on the road, but you can pretty much get from anywhere in Dominica to anywhere in Dominica at this point. So the government has really done some good work in terms of access, and is continuing to move a lot of that debris to even make the access much easier. The whole issue of potable water, that is something we almost cannot do without. We can do without food for a while, but we cannot do without good drinking water. And of course in Dominica we have the best drinking water. You can almost drink from any stream, but of course in times like this you have to ensure that the water is extremely good to avoid some sort of a secondary hazard in terms of a health epidemic. So the WASCO has been on the ball and has sort of got back a number of the systems working, and I would say that about 70% of the water systems are back in place, and at least 70% of our population have good water for using. In terms of the power, a lot is being done by Dominica. If you drive around, you will see work going on day and night. And what they're attempting to do is see how quickly they're bringing in resources from outside, both material resources and human resources, to ensure that power comes back on stream as quickly as possible. The Roseau area is already energized. The better part of Roseau, even some part of the greater Roseau area. Portsmouth is energized. We see, every day we see new street lights. So when you walk around or drive around Roseau, you see more areas electrified, you see more street lights. So that is an ongoing process. It will go on for quite a while because some of us who live in the deep rural areas, we can not even think of lights for Christmas. It's something that's going to happen next year. In terms of the other form of communications, which is telecommunications, the service providers, they have also been on the ball. And I would say that we may have something like 60–70% coverage around the island in terms of cell. Of course, the fixed line will take a while before it comes back on stream, but the cell phones, little problems. You should expect that from time to time. Even in the area where I live, once I leave Roseau and get to my home, I cannot get access to one of the service providers. I wouldn't mention which one, but I cannot get out. And people keep indicating that they've been calling me and cannot reach me. But once I get home, I cannot be reached on one of the service providers. But that will get better as time progresses. In terms of the television for entertainment, that's a little slow, but I don't think we need too much entertainment right now. I think we need to be working hard, so no time for entertainment. We need to bring back the country to where it was. So that will come on stream at some time, but we can hold back for a while on that. In terms of the cleanup, debris management has been a challenge. But every day we see we're doing much better on that. A lot of cleanup. Well, the whole of Roseau seems to be clean already. And going out to some of the country areas, you have a lot of heavy equipment, caterpillars and dump trucks on the move, trying to clean up the area. And even where a lot of the debris was stored for a while temporarily, we even already start seeing some cleanup in these areas. After a few days when all the stuff was dumped in the Goodwill area, I was a little worried as to how quickly we could get that place looking good again. And for the last few days, it has really been looking good. All you have is the zinc sheeting on one side. You have some of the lumber on another side, and a lot of the soil and sand and what have you have been moved, so there is some progress in that area. And P.S. Prevo mentioned livelihood. That's another area of lifeline. We want to see people go back to work as quickly as possible. People with small businesses would like to see them get some assistance to put their small businesses together so that they can have a livelihood as well as the people who they employ. Some of the small businesses, they employ 1 or 2 people, 5, 6, and we want to see all these people employed in quick time. So that is the focus right now, the rehabilitation and getting the lifelines up and running. Very soon, I didn't mention the transitional shelters. The intention is to move people from emergency shelters to some sort of shelters. It could be moving from an emergency shelter to another emergency shelter, but what you're trying to do is free up a school so that school can start. And it's a little unfortunate that most of our shelters are schools. But once we have an event like Hurricane Maria, what you'd want to do is as quickly as possible move people who are sheltering in schools so that schools can start ASAP, as quickly as possible. So that is going on. We're also trying to move people from shelters into their own space, because that is a little more comfortable, a little more dignified, because, you know, when you're in a shelter, you've lost all your privacy and things of that nature. And we're helping out in terms of providing tarpaulins for people so that they can quickly cover areas in their houses or the whole house, so that they can occupy it in the short term until we move to something more permanent. So people are moving, and what I refer to that as a quick fix. We use the tarpaulin, and then we will move into the whole area of reconstruction, where people are actually, and you heard P.S. Prevo mention that relief in terms of building material has started to come in. So very soon we'll be able to provide zinc sheeting and lumber and the wherewithal, what people require to make their homes a little safer and make their reconstruction efforts a little more permanent. And that will happen as we move along. There are a lot of things we have to consider in doing that, because one of my concern is that a lot of us are going to just do a quick fix, just put up some zinc, galvanized sheeting on our houses, and then maybe the next hurricane season, when we have a category 2 or 3, then these roofs are gone. So what we have to look in the reconstruction phase, that we make some of those fixes, real fixes, in terms of removing what is there and ensuring that you have a good roof that is properly connected to the rest of the house, and you put in all the features that the planning departments and the people who are more qualified than me in that area, housing and planning, will tell you to do, in terms of bolting down the roof properly on your ring beam, and also ensuring that you have the hurricane ties, and instead of using nails you use more screws, etc., etc. You'll hear more about that as time progresses. But what we want is building back better. We want people to build a stronger home, a stronger house, so that they and their families can be safe when there is another event, God forbid. But if we just do it the old-fashioned way, where we just do a quick fix, what will happen is we wouldn't need another Maria. Just a category 1, 2, or 3 will remove your roofing. We have quite a few agencies who are currently working alongside the government of Dominica. And the reason why we haven't got a housing person here with us today is because the acting Prime Minister, who is also the minister responsible for housing, is meeting some of the international and regional agencies up in the north. And so a lot of his housing staff, they have gone up to meet with him for those meetings. So that's why we haven't got somebody from housing. But a lot of these international agencies are here working alongside us, both with the transitional housing. You have Shelter Box, you have O.D.M, a lot of the UN agencies. CARICOM is now coming on board. There are plans to assist in the Kalinago area with some housing, and I also understand Digicel is also going to be doing some work there. So these things will be happening in the near future and into the longer future, because of course it's not going to be an overnight affair where by tomorrow morning everything will be hunky-dory. It's going to take a while. One of the recommendations, firm recommendations I would like to make, and when I was a National Disaster Coordinator years ago, I used to raise that issue, and many people thought that, oh well, you know, that's maybe just an unnecessary expense. We we can do without and so on. Building is expensive. To build a house is expensive. And when you tell us we have to add in that feature, it's going to put in some more cost. But I hope it is not only a suggestion or a recommendation. I hope we can put it into our building codes, into our legal framework, so that any new housing and any existing housing that can be retrofitted to have at least one strong room. So you have a 3-bedroom house, you decide, okay, this bedroom is going to be my strong room for weather events, so I'm going to put a concrete slab on top of that strong room. What it does is, one, you will not have to go to a shelter. You will be in the comfort of your home, even the rest of the house is damaged, and then you can get back on your feet much quickly and easier if that is done. So that's one thing we would really want to put on the agenda and ensure that people really take it on board. A lot of people are now talking about, I think I'm going to not put that galvanized roof again, and I'm just going to put a concrete slab. The issue with that is, can your house hold up a concrete slab? Was it so designed to hold up a concrete slab? You may be putting yourself in problems, because you also have to remember, we are not only talking about weather events in these areas, we are also talking about seismic events. So you can have an earthquake, and if your house is not strong enough to hold up a concrete slab and you put it on there, you could have your building compromised during 6, 7, 8 magnitude, of course an 8, but 6, 7 magnitude earthquake. So you have to look at that. So whatever is done has to be done in tandem with the building codes, with the advice you will get from the housing division, the advice you will get from the planning division on doing those things. So we'll leave you here with these few words on our transitioning from response to recovery. And if I may just recap a little, we pretty much have already done a lot of the things that is required for the response. It's just now, to go into, well, continue the relief to where we'll even be transitioning the relief from one stage to another. And while we are doing a parallel recovery with the relief in terms of our rehabilitation and the lifelines, there are other things that we will have to do when we set aside the response and go fully into recovery. I'm sure the members of the media here have some burning questions, so we will take some questions from you at this point.
Mr. Cecil Shillingford, good morning. Joseph Thomas. I want to congratulate you for your presentation, that of you, of course, and the PS Preview. I don't think much more could have been added to your contributions this morning. However, I have this question, or not a question really, but a concern, because I hear it being labeled out in the Dominican, in the society. And that has to do with relief, PS Preview. A lot of people are saying that the relief is not going to and is not handled by the people who are supposed to be handling that relief. You are on top of the relief situation. You are the person who is responsible for ensuring that people get relief. Give us some guidelines as to what processes and procedures are involved in the distribution of relief. We hear parliamentarians are involved and they shouldn't be involved in it. We hear this person is involved and party supporters of the government are involved in it and they shouldn't be involved. Give us some guidelines as to the process and procedure in dealing with the relief supplies.
Okay, I will defer to PS Preview on that, but I just want to say that in the whole disaster management aspect of things, when we put together a lot of these committees in the communities that are supposed to be handling certain things, remember Hurricane Maria was a first for us, an extraordinary hurricane. So immediately after the event, there were people who should have been functional. We couldn't find these people because of the road access, because of telecommunications. We couldn't find these people. So the government could not sit and wait until people could be found, people reported and what have you. So something had to be done. And that is where whatever system we have in place came from. If you have a situation where at least some things are functioning, some things are functional, and a lot of these people can jump into place right away, then maybe could avoid a lot of maybe some of the things you are alluding to. But we always have to understand that Maria was a first for us. We used to think it was Hurricane David, but it's no longer Hurricane David, it's Maria. And things had almost, if you want to say, collapsed in the sense of some of the systems and structures as per our national plan that were put in place. So I just want to say that as a preamble to what P.S. Prevo is going to say.
Cecil, I don't think this was a preamble. This was really a response and really what I would like to say. But from our end, in terms of coordination, we've been working with a combination of groups and agencies. We've tried our best to work with the local authorities. As you would understand, not all communities have local authorities. And I've learned quite a lot during this process. We started off using the census, and I will tell you that our distribution was based on communities, utilizing the census and not based on constituencies. But even in the process of utilizing the census, we realized that there are a number of communities that are not represented or that are not listed individually in the census that would have called us on the hotline. So let's say there's a community between E.O.C and Dublin, and perhaps they may not have been covered in E.O.C and Dublin. So what we've had to do over the last few weeks is identify individuals, focal points and groups in various areas that could assist us in the distribution process. And as I have said before at previous briefings, we have really been getting this distribution done through a number of processes, utilizing a number of people and a number of groups. In most cases, we are working with the local authorities. Where there are no local authorities, there are some community groups, there are improvement groups, disaster committees. In some cases, there are no improvement groups, there are no disaster committees, so we've had volunteers from the communities who have come forward. There are some communities that are split up in certain areas, so what we've done is sectionize those communities, and we have had focal points in each of those areas. I can tell you Castle Comfort, for example, does not have a local authority, they do not have a disaster committee, so we've been able to identify individuals who have come forward in various sections of Castle Comfort. They've zoned out the area, and then we provided support to them through that system. And this is what we've done in a number of other areas. There are some communities where we have not been able to have a proper system within the community. So from the distribution side, we have utilized our own transportation and also the volunteers that are assigned to us, including the Jamaica Defense Force, to do door-to-door deliveries in these areas. So in the areas around Roseau, Lower Goodwill, Upper Goodwill, Pottersville, and a few other areas around Roseau, we've actually utilized door-to-door deliveries, utilizing our transportation and volunteers who are assigned to us. So as I have said, we are working and we have tried our best to work with the systems that are already on the ground. But as Cecil had said, in the initial days, we did not have the luxury of communication or transportation, but we've been utilizing the resources that we have available to us, and we continue to be in contact with, I have spoken to, message, WhatsApp, village council clerks, village council chairpersons, parliamentary representatives from both sides of the aisle, people are interested in knowing that their area is being covered, and we are in communication with all the communities in that regard. What we've also done, and I spoke about this already previously, is that the communities, we have ensured, or we are trying to ensure, that the collection forms that we've developed, that they are being utilized in the community. We have instituted a system where everyone who receives a package from their council or from the distribution committee signs indicating that they have received a package, and this information is provided to us. We can tell at the end of the day, if it's Eggleston that they've received, that you have 200 households have received supplies for this particular distribution cycle. So again, no system is perfect, but from our level, we are doing our best to ensure that the supplies get to the places that they are supposed to go. We do have a system of accountability for our drivers, those who are assigned to us, and in some cases the communities, the councils and other distribution committees would send their own transportation. But we also have a form that the drivers sign indicating what they've received. A copy of that form remains with the distribution center, and a copy of that form is sent to the community. So we have instituted systems to ensure that there is accountability and that there is equity in the system, and as long as we are continuing this process, we will continue to do that. Thank you.
Okay, just to add a little extra on that, I myself am not too intimately involved in the relief distribution, except to keep myself informed of what is going on around. Relief is always a difficult thing to deal with. I can recall relief efforts way back in Hurricane David's time, and even when I myself was professionally involved in disaster management, some of the hiccups that went with the whole issue of relief. That's the part of disaster management I like the least. I wish we never had to do it, because there's always complaints. You always have issues where even people receive relief, they will try to tell you they didn't get anything so that somebody else could give them, and there's all these machinations going on with the whole relief efforts. In terms of the use of volunteers, I don't think anybody in recruiting volunteers would be asking people what church you belong to and what political party you're affiliated with and so on. If people volunteer, they volunteer out of the goodness of their hearts, and they are utilized. But I'm hoping that that is a wake-up call for our people, especially the people in the communities, that they have to take this whole disaster management issue seriously and ensure that they have systems and structures in the communities that are functional. And that is one of the things I will push as far as the disaster office is concerned, that the staff go out to the communities and assist the communities in getting these systems and these structures in place, and ensure that they are not a hurricane season committee or another season committee, that they are functional committees and people can rely on them at any time. Any further questions? Yes.
Julian Morris, Channel 5 News. My questions are basically for the PS. Just a couple simple things I want to clarify. One of them is, I understand, and we've heard a lot about the idea of us returning to normalcy as quickly as possible, but then you have, on the other end, populations that will be probably needing relief for quite some time to come. I'm not sure for how long. So how do you guys manage this tension between, yes, we have to get back to normalcy, but there are pockets of the society where, for some foreseeable future, perhaps people will still be needing some level of assistance. That I would like to.
That should be very difficult. That should be very difficult. At one point, we have to take a determination at what stage that the relief ends. As I said earlier, the relief cannot go on forever. So at some point, the government has to decide, look, we're going to stop the relief to all and sundry at this point, and we will continue looking at vulnerable groups. So you have elderly people, you have people already assisted by the state will continue to assist them. You have children, You have institutions. So if you are still receiving relief, it doesn't mean that because you're receiving relief, you just have to go on giving relief. If you say you're cutting the relief and relief is still coming in, then you provide them to institutions of the state like the hospitals, the prisons, the infirmary, and areas like that. So, I mean, I've been working in the region also, and I have gone to certain countries, and after a month I say to the authorities, you have to stop the relief, because if you don't stop it, you're going to cripple your economy in terms of your business community. I am one who indicated that for Tropical Storm Erica, we got too much relief, and we distributed too much relief until the private sector was screaming and they were about to collapse. So not because you continue to get relief that you should go distributing relief forever.
Yeah, I need to.
I'll still yield to the PS if she has anything else to say, but continue.
Sure yes, because I wanted to get a little more specific on tourism, because as she's here, let's take the opportunity. In a recent interview with the Minister for Tourism, he mentions a concern with the cleanup in Roseau, for example, where after the team, which is currently doing the cleanup, would go through and go around and do their cleanup, you would have certain store owners who are, later on coming in to recover, open up their place, dumping stuff again on the sidewalks and so on. I'm not sure how they're managing this right now, because I notice it's still happening, so I'm not sure how this is working out.
I wanted to follow up with that. You're going to be stopping the relief, and we understand that at some point you have to stop it. What happens to your stock in I wouldn't want to say stock in trade, because that's stock. But what happens to the stock that you have? What do you do with it? I mean,
well, the relief is already slowing down in terms of the
what you get in.
The amount of things we are getting because right now. But what I'm saying is, at some point, if you take a determination that you are going to stop the relief and you're still getting stuff, it's not going to be like the early days. And we have to also understand that Dominica maybe was one of the 10th countries hit this year. So we would not get the level of relief that we got for Tropical Storm Erica when we were the only country hit. So at some point, the relief will slow down. But what I'm saying is, if there's any residual, any small amount still coming in, the state will decide that it's providing it to the hospital, to the infirmary, other senior citizens' homes, the prisons, etc. But the relief just cannot keep going on and going on.
I'm sure you must have been aware that people are saying that stuff we got for Erica, still there.
Well, I'm not aware of that. I visited all the warehouses that are being used, and I'm not aware. I'm only aware that maybe there's some clothing in some warehouse. But again, if I had my way, no clothing would come to the country after a disaster situation, because it creates more problems for you in terms of management than anything else. I mean, I was on the port and I saw a certain group bringing in clothing, and I even told the port manager to have them put it back on the boat that it was coming in on, and I was almost accosted by members of the, well, not physically accosted, but with their tongue, verbally accosted, because of the comments I made. But left to me, I would not bring in all these second-hand clothes and everything people have in the States and elsewhere they want to dump on these third world countries. Yes.
I think I almost lost track of your first question. But I'm happy to talk about Roseau cleanup to start. We will be having a press briefing for tourism sometime next week. There's a lot happening that we need to speak about in terms of clearing of some of the sites. I can probably just say today that we've been working this week on clearing the Emerald Pool site, but I don't want to preempt our tourism press briefing, but I'll just give that general information. And today we are at Trafalgar. We are working with a team of 11 Cubans and also a team engaged by the Ministry of Tourism, and they have been working this week. The Emerald Pool Trail is almost back to normal as it could be in terms of access to the pool. And today and tomorrow we are working on Trafalgar, and we'll be moving to the various sites with the Cuban team as well as with teams employed or engaged by the Ministry of Tourism. As relates to the Roseau cleanup, this was a challenge that the Minister had highlighted. As you do know, the Ministry of Tourism and Urban Renewal is responsible for the cleanup of Roseau in collaboration with Public Works. We have had a challenge where we have cleaned certain streets, and now there are individuals and commercial enterprises who are currently doing their cleaning, and they are now placing the debris on the roadside. But we are committed to continuing the cleanup, so we still have the cleanup crew. I think we have between 60 and 70 individuals who are engaged by the Ministry of Tourism who are continuing the cleanup around Roseau. We also have a number of trucks that continue to pick up the debris, but we do encourage people to do your cleanup within a certain time so that we can wind down and work on just the cleaning aspect of the city. There are a number of things that we need to do to get Roseau back up, and even at our tourism press briefing we'll talk about some of the urban renewal projects that we had planned that we still need to get on stream, particularly as it relates to the Bayfront and the Old Market for the receipt of cruise lines early next year. So it is a challenge, but it is something that we are committed to continuing with the cleanup as it relates to Roseau. So we are just encouraging the businesses and the residences who are still cleaning Roseau to ensure that that can be done in a timely fashion. If you require any assistance, please contact the Ministry of Tourism, and we really would like to ensure that we can move to another phase. Since we are talking about transitioning, we need to get the Bayfront back alive. We need to get the Old Market cleared, and that we can have vendors back in the market, and we need to be able to have spaces that are available to park and to move around in Roseau. And we know that the debris in some of these areas is creating some kind of obstruction. Back to relief. I mean, I'm one of these people who have to transition back and forth, and I have had to balance these two responsibilities over the last few weeks. But I must say that we will have no stock in trade, Mr. Joseph, because I can tell you that, and I have mentioned this before, the average turnover for us right now has been 2 or 3 days in terms of the actual receipt of supplies and distribution of supplies. Whatever we get in, we distribute right away. So there is not going to be a situation where we will have an accumulation of items that we have to figure out what we must do with it. As a matter of fact, this week we had a slowdown in terms of what was received, and we decided to use the time to do distributions, just as I said earlier, to the infirmary, to the other homes for the aged, to the we are working with Yes We Care, for smaller targeted distribution with what we had available. So there is no accumulation of anything at any of our warehouses. Whatever comes in, initially we distribute it straight from the port. So whatever came in, we cleared the containers, and trucks came in, trucks that we had engaged or trucks from the communities, and distributed from the port directly to the community. So there was no accumulation at any warehouse. Now that we've moved to warehousing, whatever comes from the port, as soon as we have access to the containers, we have a number of truckers who have been engaged, and they have been working with us pretty much full time for the last 3 or 4 weeks. They move the goods from the port to our various warehouses. We basically have 2 main warehouses. I've spoken about this before. And from the warehouse, we sort and load for communities immediately, and within 2 or 3 days, everything is out. We are in a position where we are calling our volunteers who are on the port to ask, what do you have available today? If there is not enough available for distribution as the cycle comes up, then we would, go back into the government procurement system. But I can assure you that all of the supplies that we've received, that we are distributing in the quickest possible time. We also, in terms of where we have challenges, it's probably with clothing that we've received in bulk that needs to be sorted, and in some cases, we need assistance to be able to do that. But what we've been able to do, though, is in the non-food items, when we distribute food, we've been able to assign some of these barrels and boxes of clothing to communities, and ask that they sort and distribute in the community, because it's a challenge for us in terms of manpower to be able to sort the clothing that we receive. However, whatever we've received, we are distributing along with the food and water supplies that have been sent to the communities, and hopefully in the communities, and we do know that people are sorting in the communities and distributing in their areas. So that's my response to that. But any other supplies that we are receiving now, like I said, we are passing on. If they are non-food supplies, we are passing on to the relevant agencies. For example, we have received a number of items like adult diapers, for example, that we have distributed both to communities and to all the homes for the aged. So when we send items to the homes for the aged, and we do look out at the needs of these homes, and we would ensure that things that we have in excess supply, that they can be sent to the relevant agencies. The same with agencies that care for children. We have been receiving items for babies and children, and in addition to distributing those within the communities, we are also supplying to the hospital and to chances and to other areas where children are being taken care of.
One of the very early instructions from the Prime Minister was that we should not stock relief. The relief comes, send it out to the people at the same time, so we would not have the problem of managing warehouses and what have you. Soon as the stuff comes, take it out. That was very clear from early o'clock after Hurricane Maria. Do we have any further questions? Okay, if we don't, let me thank PS Prevo for being with me this morning. Let me thank all the radio stations and the social media groupings that have come together to broadcast this press briefing, and thank the media for being there, and also the staff of this unit for doing all the behind the scenes technical work to ensure that we have a good broadcast today. Just like to say thanks to all Dominicans and those from further afield who are viewing this broadcast, and have a pleasant day, everybody.